Many of you know Peter, but some of you may have attended some of his previous presentations. Some of you probably read the bio, but some may have not. Peter's a remarkable guy to call a friend and to work with in FSN. His background is in science and business. He's been an entrepreneur. He's been a domestic and international bureaucrat, an executive in large technology companies, a diplomat, and a management advisor. And both the Telfer School of Management and the Faculty of Engineering at U of O are lucky and pleased to have him affiliated with them. He's been involved in AI for a very long time. I think 4 decades now, Peter, maybe more. And recently has been actively involved in ethical and policy issues, both on his own initiative and using the University of Ottawa as well as FSN as a bit of a platform, but most substantially and visibly as a member of the IEEE USA Artificial Intelligence Policy Committee that's advising the White House and US Congress on various issues. And he's also chair of the Foresight Synergy Network, so we're all very grateful for that. Today's topic is on AI regulation, and we've got a lot to learn about that, what's possible, what's desirable, what's undesirable. Peter has recently written, along with Eli Fati, a paper that has got substantial traction on Peter's Substack, and so the topic of that is generative artificial intelligence and integrity, winners and losers. So Peter's thought long, hard, deep, and expertly on a lot of these issues, and we're delighted that he's going to be speaking with us today. Over to you, Peter.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Stephen. And I look forward to giving this presentation. This is the topic for today. It'll actually going to focus on guardrails and regulations in the sense of, these are very new things. And so they're not in place yet, or they're just starting to become in place. So we'll explore all of that as we proceed here. So the topic for today is, I'd like to give a brief review of some of the past comments I've made about AI, because over the last five years, because many of them have actually come to be true. And they set the stage for where we're going to go today when we look at generative AI and integrity. And I'm going to consider this from the point of view of winners and losers. And if we don't get a handle on it, I would argue the biggest loser is going to be society. And so that's going to lead to the need for guardrails and regulations, or at least a discussion on that. And then we'll have a summary. So that's the essence of today's discussion. And of course, we'll have hopefully a fruitful conversation after in the form of general discussion, Q&A, and so on. So I called it a rampage. Why did I call it a rampage? Well, AI has exploded in recent months in the context of the release of a chatbot. You all know it, I'm sure, as ChatGPT. It's a part of one aspect of AI, natural language processing. And so you can think of speech and hearing and seeing and touching and all that kind of thing as part of AI. But this is the natural language processing part of AI, which is one of the older aspects of AI, in fact. And today, these chatbots, and that's a generic name, are based on large language models, or LLMs. And I'll define some of these terms in a few minutes. But it's these large language models that are the substance of a lot of debate in terms of both how they got the data and then how the data is used and who owns the data, etc. So there's a lot of a quagmire, actually, around LLMs at this point. And these are another aspect is, of course, these training of these things are scraping in data from the internet, and it's being done without the user's consent, who owns the data, and therefore there's all kinds of new legal issues arising as to both the integrity of the data as well as the ownership of the data, and whether there is in fact intellectual property rights associated with the data. We've seen, for example, recent debates has nothing to do with AI per se, but here in Canada, as a consequence of something that happened in Australia, where the big platforms that aggregate news are now starting to restrict its access because they're restricting its access in Canada because the government of Canada is saying these companies have to pay some kind of a compensation to those who could create the news pieces that they quote all the time. So this is another interesting debate. It's sort of related to this same thing about large language models and the legality issues. And also the global media are full of all kinds of stories about the power and the shenanigans of these chatbots. They're now out in the wild, as I like to refer to it, and as a consequence, they are in fact potentially could be very dangerous. Very constructive and very supportive to many things, but of course it's the other side of the coin that we have to consider if we want to have a stable society. And so as a consequence, governments and a number of industry leaders are called for guardrails and regulation. These are yet to be developed, but we'll explore that further. So I will move on to looking at how we got to where we are. And this is a quick summary, because I'm looking at who's controlling things. And so for like 6,000 years or so, we've had landlords or owners of land. And these are in many centuries, and millennia, they were the aristocracy of society. And then we came along only about 350 years ago with so we had a long period of sort of very slow growth, both in population and in use of technologies and development of new technologies. But then there was a major change about 350 years ago, and that consequently led to, of course, the Industrial Revolution. And we now have a new kind of revolution that's been going on for about 50 years, roughly. And that's the collection, manipulation, and control of data. And data is now the new resource. Beyond the natural resources that we harvest from the land and the sea, we now have a new resource called data, which we harvest from people and systems. So these journeys are marked by a transition from manual labor, man to beast, and went from that in the time of controlled land until the modern era, where we got machines assisting labor-saving devices as a consequence, replacing both man and beast, but streamlining the contribution of the man and the woman in the workplace. And then we are into the age of cognitive tools for societal good or use. And at the same time, all these are accelerating rate of return. I mean, you can see from 6,000 to 350 to 50 years or less, we're making huge steps in the transition of society if you look at the big picture. So lessons from history, well, we certainly can see that the Industrial Revolution changed so many things. Its technologies are just a few of the simple examples there, but what it really did fundamentally is it changed our polities, our societies, our economics, our employment patterns, our demography, and even our culture. We invented the corporation. I mean, all the things that are a consequence of that. This is all because we invented machines to do stuff, and we had to organize ourselves around those machines. I would argue that AI is likely to have a similar, if not more profound impact on society than what we've seen with the Industrial Revolution, which includes, of course, the introduction of electricity, the communications that we have at long distance, etc. So we're really talking about some profound changes. So to the general public, it's sudden AI has appeared. It's not new. It's been around, as I'm sure you all know, since the mid-50s, and a conference that held in summer workshop in 1956. So it's not new. It was, as I say, it was 1950s when AI was coined as an expression. I don't think it was ever thought about in terms of its implications to society at that time. But AI over those periods since basically the commercialization of AI started to appear in the 70s and into the early 80s. So it was about 30 years of basic research that was going on. And then during that period, there was a lot of promise, particularly by leading researchers, that we're going to have sentient computers within 20 or 30 years of, say, 1960. Well, clearly that didn't happen. So AI has actually gone through this vacillation of springs and winters, as we've called it. There was never summers or autumns. It was just spring and winter. And then by the early 2000s, AI really, I would say, came into full bloom, as in a summer at least. I'm going to talk about, it may still fail us. So I'm still using the seasonal metaphor here. Where it goes from here depends on both technical advancements. We'll talk about some of those and the limitations, actually, and social acceptance. And I would argue that social acceptance will probably be the biggest pushback. So let's look at that, see what happens. So today, that path is unclear as to where it's going to go. So it skyrocketed into the world news with all kinds of stories of promise and peril for humanity. Of course, Hollywood has preceded us with some dystopian movies like The Matrix and movies of that sort. Political leadership around the world, both allies and enemies, so to speak, of all declaring AI as a strategic national asset. I would say most of these people are making the right statements to the benefit of mankind and humanity. But of course, they may be using these things in nefarious ways, and we'll find out a little more, talk a little more about that later. And governments are pouring billions of dollars, if we use Canadian currency as a number, billions of dollars into AI research and related industry development in the form of AI research, primarily money for their academic institutions and their national laboratories. And companies too are investing even more than governments in terms of billions of dollars in applied AI research and product development, enhanced AI-related services. And the AI-related services are just at the very nascent stage right now. And competition is heating up, both between companies and between nations. And between the companies, I would argue they can't stop competing now. They're at a point where if one stops, the other one then will be judging who's playing by the rules. So this is another reason for the calling for regulations, particularly from the perspective of the companies. They're asking for some kind of third-party assistance because they're in such an intense competition. Meanwhile, companies can't stop, as I was saying there at the bottom. So this is a big issue that is before us today. Just to put all of this in perspective, AI really has three flavors. I'll call it narrow AI, which is the present. We're picking the low-hanging fruit, to use a metaphor. General AI is like a human intelligence level, average human intelligence, that we anticipate could emerge sometime in this century, perhaps even before 2021. But this is the future, and future we don't know. We can only put scenarios on it, and we may not even get the right scenarios. So it's still speculative because it suddenly has burst a huge balloon about how long it was going to take to get to where it is today from the release of ChatGPT. The notion of superintelligence, which is that movie stuff dystopian movie stuff I alluded to, that's really very much in the future, if at all, and we may not even get to that point if we self-destruct in the meantime. So despite all the media hyperbole and science fiction about apocalypses, the time for superintelligence isn't yet or anywhere nearby. And that's, I think, all I'll need to say there. By the way, the coding here on my slides, a lot of these are going to be quite wordy because it's a subject that's really got no pictures to go with it. It's still at a discussion level of policy and so on. So the things that are in bold in the textual areas, besides the titles, are the main points I want to make, and the other things are there for your edification should you wish to look at this material after the fact. And I might, from time to time, point out some of these subpoints. So here is some of that terminology. I will not read it in any form, but you can see this as a reference point. So when we talk about generative AI, this is the subject that we're really exploring today because it's one that's causing the big transformation. It's driving the change that's also the subject of this discussion today. So just keep these words in mind, and you can always consult me if you need a reminder as we go through this. So the current state of AI. Well, artificial intelligence is actually, as I said, a coined term that with no implications to society when it was coined. But today's AI algorithms, well, first of all, artificial intelligence doesn't mean it's intelligent. It's not, in fact. It's all about statistics and algorithms and large amounts of data that can be used to train the algorithms to search for certain patterns. So we should not apply human qualities such as integrity and ethics to label these applications, but rather apply these to the people who develop and misuse these applications. So the ethical and integrity issues are really embedded in the developers, in the humans that are creating these things and the humans that use them. And I think this will be important to carry through. It's not in the systems themselves. Data could be corrupted, of course, but that's not in the system, so is it the data that feeds the algorithm. Is AI dangerous? It's a question that some often ask, and I would suggest that it depends. And there's many metaphors you can use: a hammer, an axe, a match. I suggest here a match. A match is dangerous in that you can burn a house down with it, but at the same time you can cook a meal. So it depends. And at the same time, there are reasons to be concerned about what's happening with AI, and these are both technical as well as socioeconomic. And these are able to, like, the machines are now able to do things that are less than what we are, more general than what we used to do with robots. As in, they were trained to pick up a specific piece that had to be lying in a certain fashion and not in a stack and so on. And it would be able to just simply pick it up, didn't know what it was picking up, would be able to pick it up and put it in a certain place, all pre-programmed. But nowadays, with AI and robotics, with the type of learning modules we can create, these things can see what they pick up, they can turn it over if they have to, and they can put it in a different place if it's needed, because there might be a way it can be multi-purposed. So there's a lot of different developments that are happening within this technology that are making it more human-like in terms of capability of function. Now, in the future, AI-enabled robotics and related systems will be able to perform human-like tasks that may lead to massive displacement in employment. And not only, of course, from the shop floor where we think of the robots, but also in the systems that are embedded in the desktop applications we use as knowledge workers. So accountants and auditors, they deal with financial statements, and they look for, obviously, according to sets of rules, and they look for, see if there's any things called fraud, for example. And these things have been hidden. This is always, you try to hide these things, you're being bad. But there's sneaky ways of trying to find these things, particularly now using AI techniques and large amounts of data for training purposes. So professions are under threat, as well as more traditional blue-collar workers, as we sometimes call them. So these are tasks requiring problem-solving, decision-making, interaction with less than fully predictable environments. This is where the AI is now starting to show its spurs in terms of being able to work in that kind of situation, because all the machines that we basically had before operate in a very specific way and predictable way in a given environment. And if they fall off the road, it's because the human drove it off the road, or maybe the wheel fell off the road and the human couldn't control the car. But fell off the car, I should say. The wheel fell off the car. But the point is that in general, this is the problem that we're dealing with. More advanced solutions require more intelligent decision making, and we're now able to get machines doing some of that. Also, the whole use issue to these things like the match. And so these are just questions to think about. So from a dual use perspective, integrity, and I'll get on to what I mean by this. You probably have an idea yourself about integrity, and you have an idea about ethics. So we'll discuss those in a bit more detail in a minute, but it is, I lumped together. They're two separate things, but they were very interrelated. And I would argue that you think about these things, and then where do you stand on autonomous weapons, for example? That's where a machine can shoot to kill without a human in the loop. Or you might be dealing against, as I mentioned, fraud. So fraud detection. Are you against fraud? And therefore to detect fraud. Are you against, less privacy? I mean, we seem to be losing privacy as a result of the internet's platforms, but is this a concern to you? Are you against or for, the use of any kind of news? Any news is good news, as far as some people are concerned. And that we have so much fake news now. How do we differentiate that? AI is being able to create things that look so real, it's very difficult to tell the difference between reality and something that's been digitally simulated. assuming you're watching it on a screen. The real answer about AI's danger is still undetermined. And it's only going to be time and transformations that are going to occur in the future that's going to give us an answer looking back to how we got to where we are then. The sudden appearance of generative AI enabled chatbots, though, may be the beginning of this slope as to pushback. So here are some negative public perceptions of AI. One that I'm sure is very common with many of you as well as the general public is anticipated mass losses of jobs. And as I was pointing out, it will not just be on the shop floor, the warehouse, or in retail, or in restaurants and entertainment. I mean, I'll get on to entertainment in a few minutes with respect to another issue. The perceptions of digital surveillance is certainly another big issue that a lot of people are concerned about. We already have surveillance in many respects with, cameras all over and so on, but AI is now in an ability to actually make inferences from data that we provide to sign up for a website or to subscribe to a magazine. So there's a lot of there's a developing loss of trust in this world of digital surveillance because of digital surveillance. And the rise of superintelligence, I think I've put that to bed already, but I don't feel that's an issue that fits in our conversation today at all. So I'll just leave it there. There is there is the fear factor in the public about the rise of superintelligence. In a sense, they expect it much sooner than, of course, any of the pundits might suggest it's possible. And public fear factor is greater than any expressed by political leadership, as political leadership is talking about the promise of AI and providing large amounts of money to ensure their nations are equipped to deal with AI in a certain way. And they have yet to start addressing some of the more dark side. And this is where we're starting to talk about regulations and guardrails. And so it's the governments that are being called on to do that. So let's get into this in more detail. So AI and geopolitics. Well, this is, of course, governments in a sense. So it has AI has enormous potential to be disruptive to the current models of governance, be they the state, and that could be democracy or autocracy. Although many think that the democracy is going to have greater struggle dealing with this technology than autocracies will, because of the nature of control. Just like I was speaking in the three models of past, land, and machines, and now data. So there's the things that can be done in AI and geopolitics is increasing the echo chambers of social segmentation. And social media has already done this in spades, and AI with fake news, deep fake videos and things, which we'll speak about in a few minutes, are only going to accelerate that. It's, in fact, as I was saying, hard to discriminate fake news from real news, especially when it's illustrated. Electronic meddling through digital malfeasance is now becoming a common thing, whether it's phishing exercises that are non-AI, but things that deal with accessing your bank accounts or personal information, medical records, etc. All kinds of things there. And then in the elections process that we have in our democracies, and some autocracies pretend they do have an election process. So, purposeful disruption of critical infrastructure is another issue that we've seen already happen. For example, the pipeline issue in the United States a year or so ago was critical infrastructure that shut down distribution of fuel for some weeks. So that was a major economic impact. So there's also rising social and economic impacts, and these are things that are accelerating job loss across multiple business sectors, and this is primarily robotics and machine learning. It's a serious global public policy problem today. The things that OECD, United Nations groups are now talking about in a big way. One possible, it was never a response, but maybe a possible social economic impact of AI is the greater effort to instill the idea of a basic income within certain societies. That might be a positive development. Canada has a basic income undercurrent. It's been going for several years, but it's still not a formalized national program. And there will, of course, be all kinds of new kinds of jobs, and they'll primarily be in knowledge-intensive areas, is what is expected. And there'll probably be new types of jobs that are assisted by AI. We already can see, researchers are using ChatGPT, for example, to give them some ideas about some of the things they're exploring. I've even used it in that context to get ideas for this talk. It's not from ChatGPT, but some of the ideas I got to patch others that I had put together. So dual use prospects are high and broadly worrying. That's the bottom line on this one. And if we think about the future of AI, there's really two directions, if you like. The first is what has happened already and may repeat itself, and that's cyclical, ideas of going through these winter springs. And the second is that it has got to an irreversible tipping point, and that will then be where we have heading towards this unprecedented non-human intelligence explosion, which we'll see in the sense of general narrow AI becoming general AI, maybe within 20, 30 years. But it's a forecast. That's nothing to say that it's the truth. And the truth is there. It's a matter of when. So we don't know when yet. And I will go to the next one. There are also things that we call disruptors that could stop things from happening. And one of the major disruptors is just the progress in the scientific advancement. And then ultimately limitations in the technical environments for pressing large language models. I mean, there's one that's Chinese have developed, Baidu has developed. This has over 1 trillion. That's a big number, over 1 trillion parameters. ChatGPT is less than 200 million parameters, the one that was released to the public in November last year. So hardware limitations are also a possibility, and that's yet to be determined, but it's a possibility. And there's also wild cards, I'll call them. There may be some breakthroughs in neuroscience outside the domain of computing science, but in the domain of the study of the human mind and brain, that there could be some big breakthroughs. We also know that there's a number of efforts, even national programs in China about cognitive enhancement technologies, linking the human brain to AI chips and things of that sort. We've heard about this with Musk and his many adventures in the US. There may also be a Sputnik event that triggers nations or a nation or a group of nations to suddenly say, we got to wake up to this and do something. Sputnik event, as those of us who went through the new math in the early 60s as a consequence of the Sputnik being launched, and the Americans and their allies suddenly realized we needed more STEM in our public system. And so they pushed math and engineering and science, and that might happen again in the context of diving into the use of AI and pushing its capabilities. And of course, there's this societal disruption and disinclination that may be the pushback that ultimately could lead to another winter in AI. So these societal concerns are also reflected in things such as the responsible supervision of AI systems. This is where I would suggest integrity and ethics are deeply involved. Governance models and how it's governed. Who has responsibility and recourse. Guardrails, currently they're being talked. Regulation is currently being talked about as enforceable by law, but there are no laws yet on the books, but there soon will be, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. And the ethical directions of AI, well, AI is not moving in a single ethical direction. I mean, that's obvious when you think about people who use it for good and people who are now being nefarious with it. So those are two completely different directions. And of course, all the players, and this is now in the wild, as I said, so there's now literally millions, tens of millions, or hundreds of millions of players that are out there. And each one could make a difference by developing some type of an app that can penetrate a security system or get around a piece of critical infrastructure. So there's all kinds of issues out there with all of the players are expecting positive outcomes against their goals. But they're at completely opposite ends of the spectrum of what is fair and what is right. Versus I want to do it, I want to do it. It's up to me to do it. And just to suggest there are some promising ethical applications of AI, and I would just break these are just examples, and I broke it into three broad domains: the infrastructure of our society, the manufacturing base that makes the things we use and buy, and the professional services that are provided to keep us in good health and our money managed, etc., and push the frontiers. So those are the three promising. These are three promising broad areas. But of course, every one could be manipulated for purposes of other than being good. So is there an emerging AI race? Well, and if so, why? Well, I think I'm starting to see the reasons why. There's a potential here for a great amount of wealth creation. And it's clear that AI is a disruptive technology in its own right, meaning that it can cross paths of many other technologies and enhance them or even replace them. And so this has got huge wide-scale potential for new apps and new wealth. And AI enabled and also AI is enabling all kinds of other disruptive technologies. You can imagine when we match up knowledge management, not knowledge, deep learning type things with a CRISPR. The ability to do genome work. And this is really a whole kind of areas that are new to policy and new to law and new to science. And the global economic benefits from AI are anticipated to add trillions of dollars to the global GDP. Now, that's over the course of the next decade or more. But it's certainly already massive amounts of money are being made, as well as, of course, being spent on AI today. And we can anticipate that the capabilities and capacity will define the competitive advantage of nations in the future. Sort of like how Britain dominated for a certain period of time with the Industrial Revolution. And then America dominated for a certain time because it streamlined the Industrial Revolution and added new things such as the information technology component that we're now seeing advancing at a great pace. So now let's turn the subject to winners and losers. Is there any questions or comments there, Phil? Steve. Artificial intelligence integrity, the winners and the losers. Well, in the winners context, I would say there's three broad sets of winners, and the losers, well, that we'll explore. I won't say how many right at the moment. So there's growing concern about the potential for sophisticated use of AI to create deepfake videos, images, audios, and text that manipulates and or fabricates content. So clearly the people who develop that are probably consider themselves winners, and the people who use it are probably losers, as a metaphor here. So this kind of behavior can lead to the erosion of trust and credibility. And that can be in things like the news, politics, online interactions, and even friendships, be they persons or between nations. So now let's differentiate integrity versus ethics. Integrity, in our view, in my view here, is an internalization of beliefs such as being honest and fair. It's absolute, lies at the core of human psyche or anima. Integrity, on the other hand, integrity manifests itself through human ethical behavior. And I would argue that ethics is a cultural set of rules and ideas that have evolved over time against an expanding framework of moral principles. I mean, we in the Western society, so to speak, had slavery, organized slavery until a few centuries ago. And it still exists in the world today, but that's an example. We have moved our human moral principles to become more embracing. Ethics, therefore, is an externalization, and it's shaped by our cultural environment. And our cultural environment is varied between East and West, for example. I'll give a metaphor, I'll give an example here. This was a test that was done at MIT, looking at the introduction of autonomous vehicles. And the simple question posed was, there's two groups of people crossing the street, child and adult. and elderly adult and child. And the question was to people in the East, the car should run over the child, and the people in the West, the car should run over the adult. Completely different ethical perspective on exactly the same issue of choosing what to do. Quite different, and yet profoundly have profound implications to how we're even going to get consensus around what we do with this type of technology. The winners. Well, in addition, the main winners, I think, are going to be the platform makers. They're the ones who are winning at the moment. But the next set of winners is likely going to be the early adopters, those who take on this technology for purposes of using it to improve their services and their business products. And they will certainly benefit, I think, enormously from this. And that's this group here, the next biggest winners. But the third category, and I put winners in quotations here because I don't like the thing of it as winning, really. But that's unfortunately are the emerging range of nefarious actors. And who use this GAI with the intent of influencing others for a wide range of selfish and or ideologically motivated intents. And those can range, of course, from things like fraud to espionage, which could be espionage, industrial espionage, company to company, or even state espionage. And we know about that because countries have espionage agencies. Clearly, this category operates in a world where integrity is irrelevant and disruption is a purpose. And that's this third category. They really have lost their integrity and operate in a different world of ethics, personally motivated. So who are the losers here? Well, given the potential for dual use and abundance of nefarious actors, there are already cracks in the social fabric starting to appear. For example, there's documented cases where a lawyer has presented a case in a courtroom that turned out to be a fake case that wasn't probably obviously vetted by his staff or even the lawyer or her staff, because that was quickly shown to be a fake case because it didn't exist in any legal proceeding. Also, we've had situations where financial statements have been fraudulently created by chatbots, and there's an amazing story in which Google, on demonstrating its latest product using a chatbot, actually had some of the most influential IT type journalists present for the launch of this product and had a miserable failure. The net result is that it's lost, believe it or not, $100 million in one day as a result of that faulty demonstration. And in addition, serious concerns about job security are arising. And here's an example. You're all aware that there's been a writers and I guess it's actors strike in the United States since earlier this summer. It's got two main themes. One, of course, is a classic of any unions is get more pay, but the other is the threat of GAI displacing jobs, and it's a big issue. And so this is where we now see a major industry, the entertainment industry, that feeds the world with American entertainment, is actually pushing back on the latest developments in AI. And this is, I think, the beginning of a major time we're going to see in the next several years as different industries and professions are seriously threatened or perceived threat by an oncoming technology. Because they're based on these systems are based on vast quantities of data for training and decision making, much of which is scraped from the internet, is leading to new kinds of legal problems. And I touched on this a few minutes ago. And moreover, if the training data are intentionally corrupted or manipulated in some way, they could lead to compromised integrity of the person using the system because they were believing something different. Adversaries can inject misleading or distorted data into a training process to influence the behavior outcomes of an AI model. And this could lead to actions as incorrect decisions, loss of integrity to the user, with misleading or misleading and or disinformation. So what's driving this erosion of trust in society at this point in different levels of society? Well, AI chatbots can be programmed to manipulate or deceive users. They can also simply deceive the user with just the way the prompts are given to them. The prompts is when you type in a question or comment and ask the chatbot to reply. It can lead you into all kinds of discussion that is totally made up. Because remember, these systems are not intelligent. They're just playing with statistics. Very sophisticated. So a lot of understanding of the rules of grammar and the syntax of grammar. And that's for all the languages that are supported. It's not just English that's active here. It's on many languages. Chinese, Mandarin is one that, of course, is also big on the stage because of the large players in China that are developing similar technology. So AI algorithms can be manipulated or intentionally biased to achieve certain types of outcomes. This could be like in surveys of various sorts. They're often, I'm sure all of us have filled in online surveys. We think we're doing the right thing because it's a trusted source that we're dealing with, but maybe it isn't. Could be a phishing site. AI algorithms employed in decision-making processes can also inadvertently perpetuate or amplify existing biases and inequalities in an AI-enabled application. Like loan approvals. If you live on one side of the tracks, then you're not going to get a loan. If you live on the other side of the tracks, then we might give you a loan. I mean, that's a very simple divide. Hiring decisions, similar. And also even in the criminal justice application. I mean, we already have courts that sentence innocent people to jail because of the arguments that are made and how it's made, that the jurors believe that a certain person is guilty. When in fact, years later, it's discovered they were actually innocent. Somebody else was found to be the guilty party. Anyway, that's, of course, human to human. So we can now start to do this in our machines, too. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And I'll just go on to move to the next slide. What is driving this erosion further is the lack of data protection measures. So there's a lot of emphasis, as you're well aware, in this country and several others in the last number of years about improving the data protection. We have our PIPEDA, so-called acronym is PIPEDA. It's our public document on privacy. That's getting some updates in a new bill that's before the House right now, Bill C-26 and Bill 2 actually, Bill C-26 and C-27. C-26 is dealing with cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. C-27 dealing with news and privacy and digital rights. So AI can be employed to evade privacy, and it can also, the algorithms in AI, which are the formula, the code, if you like, are widely used in stock markets for algorithmic trading. That is already something that's been done for some while, and these are where it makes fractions of a second difference in how it processes. You could make a huge money return or a big loss if you do the wrong twist on it. So these are just examples. Final prints there will give you more detail. So further to this, integrity is not prioritized in AI development and deployment, and society as a whole will suffer if integrity isn't. And it's not basically discussed as a major thing at this time. And in fact, we've seen in the recent competition that's going on, and you might have heard about this, that some of the big companies building these chatbots and large language models are letting many of their ethics staff go because they're in such intense competition. They don't want to find out that there's something that is going to take time to fix. They'd rather fix it on the fly. So this is not the way businesses should be introducing products to the market, especially to vast numbers of people across the world. At least that's my opinion. Bias algorithms or discriminatory practices can also reinforce existing disparities and exacerbate social inequalities between groups and among groups and within groups, I should say. GI can be used to create automated hacking tools of all sorts, automated capabilities to disrupt, in effect. So AI can also disrupt jobs, is again a repeat, because many of these things are building on other aspects of components of the AI threat, as opposed to the AI promise. And this is leading to workforce displacement and job insecurity that have already rattled some sources of some members of our own parliament, as well as other governments around the world. And finally, the exploitive concerns with GAI arise due to the malicious use of manipulation of AI technology, and they're not inherently stem from the AI itself. And that's the point I was trying to make earlier. It's about the designers, developers, and users who are, losing their integrity or losing their ethics or changing their opinions about things to the point that their ethics and integrity are irrelevant. So the winners and losers in the context of AI and integrity are not fixed or predetermined. I mean, those that have identified three broad categories, it could be different in 3 years from now, or maybe sooner, or maybe not at all. But the impact can vary based on the actions and decisions taken by stakeholders. Individuals who lack awareness of understanding of AI risks and the importance of integrity may be at a disadvantage. They may also unknowingly fall victim to bias or discriminatory AI systems. And lack of knowledge or control over AI systems can limit one's ability to protect their interests and challenge unfair or harmful AI practices. So these are concerns that are now leading to this discussion about the need for guardrails and or regulation. So the chatbot piece here I mentioned, which has only been released in November, had over 100 million users in about 30 days. And there's even been a record that's been broken with another chatbot type product that was released a few weeks ago, and it had 100 million users in 1 week and 1 million users in 1 hour, or something like that. Same day anyway, 1 million users. And this is a beta product. Beta product, for those who don't know, when you release things, alpha and beta. Alpha is where you test it with a small circle, see if you can break it. But beta, you test it with a broader group of people and potentially users who would try and use it in an application context. And they provide feedback as to how well the product performed. And then the product is released. So when the product is released, it's beyond the so-called beta phase. So AI systems deployed without proper integrity measures, public trust in institutions and organizations utilizing AI can be eroded. And we've already seen an awful lot of threats about in using just natural language from certain politicians south of the border that is leading to, questioning the integrity and trust in institutions, whether it's the courts or the media. So there's many things at the same time that are in flux and pulsating together, but out of rhythm in sense, making noise, no rhythm at all. Implementing and preserving integrity in AI systems points to a need to invoke some kind of guardrails or regulatory framework. That's the bottom line on all those things I've been saying before this. So the governments around the world are taking notice of this emerging issues and are starting to invoke discussions on what kind of rules are needed and how to coordinate internationally. At the moment, things are primarily being done nationally or subnationally in some cases, and growing to some international consultations. My work on the IEEE AI Committee in the United States does provide me with a lot of insight into what the US is doing with respect to communicating with its allies and partners in terms of AI. And there's a considerable amount of AI work going on in the US at the government level, policy-wise, program-wise, and research that is being funded, and new programs being designed to basically, as the US likes to say, keep the lead in this technology, because the US has been the leader and it started in America. So let's look at the definition of a guardrail. It's basically a strong fence that protects people and things from falling off a precipice. Well, that's in a physical sense. So currently in AI guardrails amount to voluntary rules to meet minimum certification and performance requirements with the intent that users are not deceived in what they request. So that's kind of my take on a minimum guardrail, or at least the current state of guardrails with respect to AI. So let's look at what's happening then and who's taking some action on this guardrail stuff. Well, in April this year, late April, China introduced guidelines for large language models. What's interesting is they issued this for public comment. I've been a China watcher for many years in science and technology and innovation, and I've never seen a document issued from the central government for public comment. But they issued these guidelines. I have a reason to believe what the reason is that they would like to play a major role in leading the world in developing such guidelines. So they were the first to release such guidelines. In fact, not only were they were the first to release them, and they also released it for public comment. Also, Canada just introduced some legislation recently, or a program. Maybe it's not really a legislation, but it's called Guardrails for Generative AI Code of Practice. It was released this month, and it has three basic approaches that are being built into this code of practice. They're being adopting safety measures, testing codes and the processes for testing, and various disclosure practices that are the three high-level components of these code of practice. You can find this under this title if you go on the internet, under government website. I believe it would be at ISET. Ontario legislation was introduced back in 2001 on trustworthy artificial intelligence framework for the use of AI within the Ontario government. And it serves as a useful government document to show how politicians at a subnational jurisdictional level are thinking about this technology and how to govern their particular jurisdiction, not only in the sense of it's governing, but I mean the industry development and all the things that are associated with it. At the national level, though, again, we look at the U.S. It's just recently, as you probably heard, because it made news, U.S. introduced voluntary guardrails for AI with 6 major U.S. AI companies signing on to have a third-party inspection of their firm's algorithms, for example. That was one of these voluntary guardrails. Not only that, but just post that signing of the voluntary guardrails agreement with the President of the United States, Google, OpenAI is the company that makes ChatGPT, Microsoft, and Anthropic, they formed a coalition for what they call responsible AI, and that was following the meeting, as I just mentioned. Furthermore, the European Union is on the verge of passing the first major legislation to regulate AI based on risk and to mandate various development and use requirements. And this will be law. So in effect, it's not guardrails. It's going to be the development of regulation. And this is moving from guardrails, as they were basically doing it now in terms of talk and promotion, to regulations. And so regulations in the main are made by governments or other authorities, like a utility, for example, or a shipping companies or a shipping association, etc., or an international organization. And these are done in order to control the way something is done or the way people behave, or both. And to date, the introduction of regulations is mostly a debate in regard to AI in both legislatures and corporate boardrooms. But some action is starting, as I've tried to point out, and these are the early days of it. However, the use of AI within the European Union soon will be regulated, as I was mentioning, and it's called the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. So you can look that up if you're interested. And it's the first of its kind in the world, and it's a 3-step process in the European approvals. After the European Parliament, it goes up to 2 higher level authorities, but it's already passed the European Parliament. Now I'd like to move towards an ending, but talk about a precautionary note to start with. The promise of AI may yet fizzle, and I hinted on that earlier, but I would say it could fizzle on the bounds of technical barriers. There could be limitations in computing resources. I mean, all of these models that are used, that are developed, not in the way they're used, but developed, require very large, high-performance computing infrastructure. Things that only the most wealthy countries and corporations can afford to even buy. So that itself is a discrimination between who can have and who cannot have these sorts of things as suppliers of these technologies. So there's technical barriers that relate to the need to continue to push for more processing capacity. We may run into something, you've heard of Moore's Law. It's amazingly held out for so many years, but it's certainly starting to look like it may be under threat with respect to the ability to densify circuits now. We're down to one nanometer type state-of-the-art circuits. Or the other thing that might, or a combination for that matter, might hit is a wall brought on by social resistance. And this is the essence of what the integrity and ethics is all about, is understanding the social dimension of both the motivators to build these things and the users who use them, and all the others who will benefit from the use of these types of technologies. So this is the precautionary, is that there could be this social pushback. So in summary then, AI and integrity component and ethics are developed and deployed with integrity. AI systems are developed and deployed with integrity as a priority of the providers. Then society can benefit from improved services, enhanced decision-making, and innovative solutions. But that's not embedding integrity in the system. It's the people who build and use the systems that have the integrity and the ethics to go with it. Also, fair and unbiased AI applications can ensure equal opportunities. I mean, this is a general view that I think most people hold to any new thing, that if it's fair and unbiased, it should be available to all. Ethical AI can also empower individuals. They can give them greater control over various things, from their personal data to the decisions that they make in their life, be it business or personal. By integrating integrity into development and development, deployment, and use of AI systems, organizations can ensure technologies that are aligned with ethical principles, societal values, and human well-being. This basically steps right up to the sustainability development goals of the United Nations at the highest level. It's a three-tiered process, and this is basically at the top tier. And emphasizing integrity in AI fosters trust, reduces risk, and does, I think, pave the way for responsible and sustainable integration of AI into various aspects of society. Furthermore, embedding AI into AI systems requires a multi-dimensional approach, and I think you can appreciate that from the many factoids I pointed out that make up this complex topic. Without adhering to developing GAI systems designed and developed by people with integrity, society will become the biggest loser, because the systems will be developed for personal gain or some, as I keep saying, nefarious gain. The results will be unpredictable and could even lead to the demise of ethical principles. And this could lead to a breakdown in social structure. You've probably heard about some people signing open letter recently about the potential for disruptive AI. This type of AI could lead to the demise of civilization or society. I was one of the signatures of that letter, and I do believe that that's a possibility if this type of technology doesn't get some kind of guardrails and regulation on it. So the general summary about the AI overall is that, of course, it's been around for some time. It's been in fits and starts. It's emerged now as a very disruptive technology. It's dual use. I didn't mention the white box, black box here, but white box means it's explainable. If it makes a decision, you want to know how it made that decision, it can be explained. But the black box, which is actually the more common form of AI apps these days, is that you put stuff in, it does something, and it comes out, and you know what you were expecting, and you anticipate, does that what came out, is that sort of what I expected? You can't ask it to explain, because it can't explain. Neither the developers of the system can explain it, nor the user can explain it. It's black. The limits to applying AI are wide open. So it can be applied across the biggest spectrum you can imagine. I mean, I'm sure you've seen art that's been generated by AI. That you give it a prompt in words, natural language, and you get a piece of art. You can even use the same prompt multiple times, and each time you get a different piece of art. So this is moving towards creation. So this is another boundary that's we're in the midst of maybe crossing, and I'm just starting to give more thought to this for potentially discussion in other fora, because it's not just replicating knowledge in the sense of like a Wikipedia and expresses it in different forms, like a journalist from the left wing would write a story about something in different words, and the person from the right wing would write the same story, but it's the facts are the same, just the words around it describe it from a different perspective. I think we can see that with the way AI is going to change people too. So this is where we'll see profound effects on society with its overall net benefits still unclear. I mean, we sense the benefits are big, but the net benefits versus the bad side, we don't know. Thank you. And I'll turn off the... Oh, by the way, I provided a couple of references on the deck. There's a University of Helsinki put together an online free course designed for the European people. So it's designed for the hoi polloi in the broadest sense, everybody. Elements of AI is the name of the course, and it's got a very high marks for its effectiveness from people around the world, names that you would recognize. And so I put that up for your edification. And at the beginning of our introduction, Steve mentioned that Eli Fahy and I did an op-ed. This is a source. It's in Medium. It was published on the 9th of August. And it's been many thousands of reads already. And we've 2 publishers have already approached us for more information about this topic that we've been published on. And so this is something that I'll be developing further with Ellie in the coming months and beyond. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.